Hi, everyone. Welcome back to Out of the Box with Christine. I am your host, Christine Blosdale, and I am really happy that you tuned in today because I have a very special guest in store for you, covering a topic that I'm interested in, and I've been frustrated in this subject matter, but he's an expert, and you're going to learn so much today. So without further ado, I want to introduce to you Justin Womack, who is a digital marketing, he's not just a digital marketing specialist, he's a digital marketing genius. He's a copywriter, speaker, and the co-host of the podcast Marketing Geeks. His website is JMackMedia.com. If you want to find out more information, we're going to have all that info and details in the video version of this. But welcome to Out of the Box, Justin. How are you doing?
I'm good. How are you, Christine?
I'm really good. I'm really good because I'm going to learn some things today, as well as our listeners and our viewers. And I just want to say, you know, I met you recently at the New Media Summit. We were fellow icons of influence, and your story about something that happened to you and how it really changed your life is something that I would love to have us share with the audience. And before we get into the whole marketing, the do's and don'ts of digital marketing and how folks can turn their brand and their business, the visibility of it into profits, because that's what we're all about, right? We want to take people to the next level. So welcome again. And if you don't mind, just let our listeners know a little bit about you and how you got to be where you are today.
Yeah, and I'll try to do it as condensed as possible, but it can get pretty deep on the story end.
That's all right.
So
we got time.
we do got some time. That's right. So I'll start with this. If I go way back to when I was younger, I think I always had like an entrepreneurial spirit. However, one of the bigger entrepreneurs in my life was probably my grandfather on my mom's side, my maternal grandfather, and he passed away when I was about like 10. And so I think on one level, had he not, I might have started my entrepreneurship journey a lot earlier. On another level, I don't know that for sure. You never know what's going to happen in life. Right. But for whatever the reason, I kind of fell off the entrepreneur path because when I was young, I was always into like baseball cards. I was into garage sales. I mean, I loved like flipping stuff, like even from a young age. I remember like I remember being at my other grandparents' house, my dad's parents, and I would try to like pour their drinks for them and sell them back to them. So just like those kind of things were like kind of deep in me. I always had a spirit for kind of making money and looking for creative ways to do that. But when I graduated high school, I think I kind of like just didn't have a plan, and for whatever reason, I kind of lost that ambition in me on that end of it. And so I went to college kind of aimlessly. I decided that I wanted to do something that sounded smart. So I started looking at engineering.
However, my God.
So I started taking all like the high-end engineering classes, getting into calculus, taking like physics, chemistry, OChem. And I realized that the math was not like my
friend.
It was not my friend, especially the high-level calculus stuff. And so I decided to abandon that, but because I'd already taken so many of these chemistry and like physics classes and all this, I went into the field of biopsychology because I had always been kind of interested in psychology, and then I already had the science background, so it kind of was a natural fit. And this was the newer major being offered over at UC Santa Barbara, which is where I went to school at the time. And so it kind of seemed like a natural fit. And it's funny because like then it really had nothing to do with where I was going, but now it's kind of circling back in my life. So funny how things work that way.
They do.
But I majored in biopsychology, which is essentially neuroscience. And it had an aspect where I could have taken a few extra classes and been considered pre-med even. So it's pretty advanced stuff. And I finished that, and of course, following a degree in biopsychology, I took the first person that offered me money was for an insurance company, which has nothing to do with anything I just studied.
But it was a paid gig.
But it was a paid gig. So after graduating, I had actually done some basic work for them while I was an undergrad. So while I was a student, I was working for this company and just doing like filing work and like answering phone calls, like basic stuff. And then when I graduated, they offered me a better gig. And they had the biggest number on the check, so or on the offer. So I went with it, and it I quickly found myself like just completely miserable. It didn't take long, I will tell you that. Within about 3 months, I was like so miserable because apparently I don't do well when other people dictate my schedule, and I also don't do well
Same.
when I'm in a position where there's like no light at the end of the tunnel. Because with this kind of a job, it's funny. After initially getting hired, I had a conversation with the VP, and he's like, I'm excited to have you on board, but is this really what you want to do for the rest of your life?
Ah!
And when he asked that question, it was probably the first time I'd even considered that this could be the rest of my life, because it didn't even cross my mind. I was probably 21 at the time, maybe 20 even. I can't remember exactly. But it was just like it was something that hadn't even like crossed my mind, and all of a sudden, like here I am, like not feeling good about what I'm doing, already being asked if I want to do this the rest of my life. And every day, this is a job that is like a routine based job. So every day felt the same. Every day was like, I always describe it like a hamster wheel. Like you're getting on and off the hamster wheel, and you're going back over and over. And it's like this cyclical thing where all I wanted to do was like, I'd look at the clock waiting for, I switched my schedule a few times, but either 5 p.m. or 6 p.m., depending on what schedule I was on, to get out of the office, or for the weekends. It's like I live my life for the weekends, and that's not like and I think a lot of people still do that.
There was a song written about it.
Yeah, there's a better way. There's a better way I've since discovered. So I often even describe this as like soul deadening. Like that's what it felt like for me to have a full-time job, because it's just, it honestly, it started eating away at me. And now while I did this, I explored a few things on the side. So, in the spirit of my biopsychology, I actually did do a little bit of studying on neurofeedback, which is basically a classical conditioning way of kind of modifying brain waves. So you'd hook somebody up to an EEG, they play like a game, and then you're giving them rewards for certain brain waves, and you're helping train them. So I did become certified in that, and had that like kind of, I did have that like hobby on the side of kind of following that psychology side, but I never really was able to monetize that, but it was just an interest. But so fast forward about 7 years of me doing this, and I eventually reached a point where I was like entering like kind of a deep depression. And I had entered a relationship pretty recently at the time, probably about a year or two in, and my girlfriend, who is now my wife, noticed how dark it was getting for me, and kind of, in a sense, like we had a conversation about it. It's like there really something has to shift. Like this is not gonna, like you can't go on like this. It's not gonna work for you. And eventually, I was able to go to my boss and actually tell him that I'm going to walk away. And I did so without a plan. Like there was no plan. Yeah, I basically just jumped. There was no plan here. And even that, because I haven't talked about this, but I'm a very introverted by nature. So I've always had a bit of a tendency to avoid conflict. And even though like a conversation like that is not conflict per se, it felt like it for me. So like those kind of conversations where actual truth is being shared are not always the most comfortable ones for me to have, or they weren't in the past. And so like that took a lot of courage for me, and it was a big step for me. But I left without a plan, and my first inkling was I gave myself a couple months to find my passion. The first thing I did was I got a job as a production assistant on a movie set, and I thought because I love movies, so I'm like, okay, maybe this is the path. So I worked on one movie. It was an indie film. It was super low budget. Like the biggest stars were Eric Roberts and Corey Feldman, and they were only in the movie they only filmed for 4 days each, and the rest was, but they were the ones selling the movie.
Correct.
But it quickly, that also came to be like, I'm like, okay, I can love movies, but maybe not love working on the back end of this, because those were ridiculous days.
It's horrific. I was a PA. I was a PA. They're horrible jobs.
It was horrible. It was not fun. There was no, it was not great. It was pretty no glory. And so I realized that also wasn't for me. And so I had been kind of interested in personal growth for quite a while, and even in college, and I had listened to Personal Power, Tony Robbins, and a lot of that stuff. And I found an opportunity to go to a seminar on neuro-linguistic programming, NLP, which is the kind of the foundation work of Tony Robbins. And so at this time, I kind of attended a seminar and kind of stumbled into it. And at the seminar, I think was the first time I found an industry that I like really, really loved and found fascinating. And it's funny, so the first seminar I attended, I bought like everything anyone could buy. So I bought the big program to go study NLP on like a high basis. I bought all the guest speaker spots, everything. But what was amazing of that is it's kind of like what led from this. So after attending this event, one of the guest speakers, I bought his. I attended his event, and there came an opportunity where he needed somebody to work for him, and I ended up getting that job. So I ended up working on the back end of it ended up being a 7-figure seminar business with really no experience in the seminar industry, although I have a wide background of different kinds of experiences, and including I had other jobs I didn't mention, like telemarketing and things like that. So I've worked in a number of different fields, and I've had some sales and marketing slight background stuff, but I kind of came in here pretty blind, and it was just me and one other full-time employee kind of operating the 7-figure business, and then there was another person that would be there part-time. But this is where I really started learning the ins and outs of digital, and especially the first time I really got exposed to like heavy-level copywriting and things like that, and it was I quickly found that I loved the work. However, it still wasn't perfect working for somebody else.
Right.
Especially because
you were good at it. So that was something that would come a little bit easy too, right?
It was, yeah. It came a little bit, certain things come to me a little bit easier, especially like with writing. I've always been considered a good writer. Luckily for me, my writing talents also lended themselves to copywriting, because I think those are very different skills, but there is some crossover too.
Yes.
So while this was going on, I had really kind of gone deep in here, but at one point during this time, I had become pretty exhausted doing this, because a lot of these days too, working for somebody else as a small business owner, that we were spending 15, 18-hour days at times, especially around when they were doing events. So it could be exhausting. But at one point during this, after kind of an exhausting few days and just other things going on in my life, I found myself kind of asked to come in on a Sunday, and wasn't expecting to come in on a Sunday, so I wasn't kind of prepared for that. And I went out to drive out, and I mean, the next thing I remember, I woke up in a hospital bed 30 days later, and came to find out that I'd been in a major car accident. But not just any car accident, but a car accident.
You go big. You go big.
Yeah, I go big.
Right.
Where my car had gone through a guardrail, it had landed vertical, and like airbags deployed and knocked me unconscious. And then it had when it was vertical, it landed on its back, but it landed inside a creek bed. So I was underwater, like drowning in a creek bed. And was actually rescued by somebody that witnessed the accident, or I would have died. So
if they hadn't seen what happened, right?
Yeah, there were quite a few. I guess there were quite a few witnesses that saw it. However, one person jumped out of their car and immediately dove in and went after me, which is pretty incredible that somebody would do that. And there's so many kind of strange synchronicities that happen with this whole thing. But I've talked, and I've become friends with him and his wife, because his wife was driving and he was in the car, and he just jumped out, and his wife just, let him do it too. She didn't stop him, which is also important. But he's told me since that he jumped in. The water was really, really dirty, and this is one of the reasons that I was in the hospital so long. Because there was like it was part salt water, part fresh water. It had sewage runoff, so it was filthy water. And he dove in. He was able to get the door open, which I don't even know how he did that. And I'm assuming that there was some sort of unlock mechanism that kicked in because the airbags deployed. I don't even know why the doors were unlocked, to be honest. And he got the door open, but I was still in the seatbelt and the airbags were deployed, and he was having trouble getting me out. So he came back up and he asked if anyone near the side there had a knife, and nobody did. And the way he's described this to me is that he said that in that moment he felt so traumatized because he knew
Yeah.
that if he's going to go back down, and if he doesn't get me, like I would die. And which is, I don't know. I mean, I think about this, like if I put myself in his shoes, it's like, would I feel the same way? I mean, I hope so.
I got full
Yeah.
chills. I could feel his absolute panic at that
Yeah.
moment.
So he went back down, and this is how he said, he says he doesn't remember a thing when he went back down, but he was able to come back up, and he had me. He doesn't know how he did it. And then he was able to bring me to, I think once he had me up, somebody helped bring me to the shore, and there was an off-duty firefighter or off-duty lifeguard also there that helped to do CPR. So it was like another
Wow.
amazing synchronicity, luck, whatever you want to call it. And they were able to keep me alive until the ambulance got there. And that was the beginning of my journey, because my lungs had gotten so sick from that dirty water that I had developed major complications. My lungs got a condition called ARDS, which is when they like harden the cardboard. And I've been told that it's somewhere in the range of like 70 to 80% of people that get ARDS do not survive. So it's very rare to survive. And it was, so I was in an uphill battle. And even when I got to the hospital too, they had to put me into a device called a rotaprone bed, which is a bed where they basically strap your body in and they rotate you. And it was to rotate like all the dirty sentiment in my lungs to keep it
Wow.
flowing. And they like, first of all, like these are rare that any hospital would have one of these in their possession, and they had it. And second, I believe they said I was the first person ever to be able to use it, because it's so rare that somebody's sick enough to need it, but healthy enough to survive being moved into it, is like the way they've described it. So, and also I cleared the maximum height limit by like a half of an inch also, apparently, because I'm 6'5".
You're tall.
So, I like barely cleared that. And if I didn't clear that, I don't think they would have been able to use that either. So it's just like all these kind of like near close calls. And again, like this all worked out, but I still had an uphill battle, because I was put into a medical coma for 30 days. On day 3, my lungs had collapsed. I had gone in at one point to multiple organ failure. My leg had turned purple. They had brought the priest down and to do like blessings. And they told my father that like when my leg turned purple, they said that they're going to take me in to operate, and it's life over limbs. So if they have to amputate, they're going to amputate. And that was,
Oh,
so it was real close to losing my leg. And somehow, I mean, I was unconscious for this, but somehow I came out of that, and with all limbs intact, and somehow survived that. And so there were lots of surgeries. I had to go with thoracotomy, which is where they had to scrape fungus off of my lungs. And then they had, and I had a respirator in for about the first 15 or 20 days. And then they switched to a trach. And so even when I came off of the sedation and out of the medical coma, I was still on a trach. So even as I came to, I still couldn't talk. So I spent about another 30 days in the hospital bed where I couldn't talk, couldn't move my body,
that's
hooked up to, I think I had, it was either 6 or 8 chest tubes, which are things that were pumping out, like still pumping out sediment from my lungs. And so it was very humbling, because number one, I was rescued, which was pretty incredible that, like I kind of like owed my life now to somebody else. And two, basically losing like what felt like everything. I mean, losing my ability to walk, losing my ability to talk, losing my ability to move. And every day in the hospital bed, like felt like a week. I mean, I don't know how else to describe it. It was like,
I recently had something where I was only in the hospital like 2 days, and I was going nuts, and I was able to talk and all of that.
yeah.
I can't imagine what was going, through your head at that time.
I remember like just trying like wish I could fast forward time, because I I knew that after another month or so maybe I can get out of here, and who knows what will happen. And I didn't know what the quality of my life would be. I didn't know things
Right.
like that, and the doctors didn't either. And so it was, there was a lot of unknowns, but it was very humbling, and it gave me a lot of time to reflect and think. And I credit a lot of this for where I found kind of the courage to get over some of my fears that had held me back, especially in the terms of like going out and starting my own business, and pursuing some things that I might not otherwise have pursued, because I kind of like the realization like, wow, this really should have been it. Like everything out from here on out, it's almost like bonus time.
Right.
And
Right.
so when I finally, so 2 months later, I finally got out of the hospital. I mean, I could I could stand and I could walk with help, but I mean, I barely even walk then. And I was able, but I was considered strong enough to not need to go to an outpatient rehab. Um, However, I still had to go every day we'd have to go to the infusion centers, which a lot of times were like the same as the cancer centers. And I'd have to go hooked up to an IV and have antifungal meds for several months, even after an outpatient, because I was on very, very high doses of those. And I was also on Coumadin for blood thinners because I had several blood clots and things like that from complications of being in a hospital bed for that long. So it was a lot. And it took me about a year to really fully recover my body from that. And I wouldn't even say fully recover, but recover enough to where I could comfortably move and comfortably walk. I mean, to this day, I still would say that like I haven't recovered the full like muscle mass or things like that, because when you're in a hospital bed that long and you have that kind of atrophy, like some of those effects are very, very detrimental, or I mean, long lasting. Like when I got out, I couldn't lift my arms over my head. I couldn't open heavy doors. Like a sliding glass door would be too heavy for me to even open. I mean, that's what the level of weakness we're talking about getting when you're leaving, like being in a hospital bed that long. And I lost about 50 pounds just because I was on, liquid diet for a good month there. And only in the last, I'd say, 2 months in the ICU, and only in the last like 5 days did I start eating solid food before they let me out. So it was a crazy experience, but one I guess I needed to kind of redirect the direction of where I was going and kind of find a different meaning with my soul alignment. Even I would describe. So it's been intense, and I mean, and I think even like I've described this, that there was, I had gotten to some pretty dark places at times, like even like with like my view on like humanity as a whole and things like that. So to have somebody like do this for me and like rescue me, and then also being in the hospital bed and seeing like people I hadn't talked to for 10, 15 years, like show up randomly, or like at least show up with letters, or, or outreach of some kind to the family. It was very humbling. And it was it just surprised me. I
You
didn't
got to
expect it.
receive. You got to receive
I got
that.
to receive.
Yeah.
And I guess it felt like it had been a long time for me, I guess. Maybe it had, maybe it hadn't, because it's easy to get jaded too. So, but this was pretty incredible. And coming out of it, like there were a few things. So like my girlfriend that I described back when I first kind of went on this journey, when I'm leaving my job, even like starting there, we were still together. She stayed by my side this entire time. And so since we've gotten married, so that was something that I was able to do. We were able to get married afterwards. And now we've had our first child, who is, he's now 1.5. And so it's pretty cool that like, one of the things I joke about is like when I got out of the hospital, like everybody's like, wow, you're here for a purpose. Like there's no way that you survived that. And there's something, you're here to do something big. And so I like to joke that, because I mean that's a lot of pressure. But now that I've had a kid that resulted from this, I'm like, well, some of that's on him now. So
He's supposed to save the world now.
Yeah, now it's him, because he wouldn't have survived if I didn't survive. So this is by proxy.
Exactly. And that guy that rescued you, he's part of your family now too. Really.
Yeah, he is, and we visited him. It's been, I think around April. It was either April this year. I think we came and we went and visited him and his wife, and he got to meet Jacob, my son, and so it's like he's like a godfather in a sense, because I don't know how else to describe that. But yeah, it's really cool. So it's been really fun to kind of make a connection with them and a relationship with them too.
But was it after that too, where I think whenever we kind of literally or figuratively hit a wall,
Mm-hmm.
It changes us on so many different levels, that you do get a great appreciation for life, and to realize that however many days that you have here on this planet, that you do want to make the most of them. And I hope that, like, because things have happened to me as well in the past, that I always want to hold on to that feeling and to never take life for granted. But also, you are here for many reasons, right? Just that's how miracles happen. It's like, oh, it's not your time yet, mate. You know,
Yeah.
there's stuff for you to do. So is that when you also went full board into your own business and doing, using some of your skills and talents, the copywriting, and such, and
Yeah,
filling in that
absolutely.
niche that needed to be filled with so many people?
Yeah, absolutely. And I think what it did again is that it took away the fears that I had around that.
Right, you
Because I,
survived. You
I
survived.
survived this,
It's like,
but there's a few things here I want to unpack because I mentioned like being an introvert, and I've battled like social anxiety and things like that in the past, and at a pretty high level. And so like that, one of my challenges was like getting my head around the idea of visibility and putting myself out there. I mean, like if I think back, to something like Facebook or even MySpace back in my time, I I would create accounts on there, and a lot of times I wouldn't even put my photo on there because it wasn't because I was afraid of privacy reasons. It's because I was uncomfortable with myself, and it was like it
right.
was a personal confidence thing. So like having this kind of gave me just kind of flipped my perspective a bit, and I don't know exactly how the shift took place exactly, but it was one of the things that I've really embraced is kind of like being able to put myself out there and take risks and things like that, which a lot of these things that I would call risks, like were risks for me, but they wouldn't be a risk for normal people. like,
But it's
um,
big. Yeah, it's big for you.
it was big for me. And even once I embraced the idea of starting my own business, like I had my own doubts around like telling people around that. I didn't even want to, at first I didn't want to tell my parents I was going to go that route. I didn't want to tell my family I was going to go that route. And, uh, and so doing that also, like, it's funny how, like, I took these actions and these things that I built up in my mind as barriers, like they were just like nothing. Like the reaction was like positive. I mean, there was like no negative to it. So
Right.
it's like, but I had used this as an excuse, like in the past, for some of the reasons I wouldn't go after my goals, because I had this sense of identity that didn't match that in my mind anyway. And so getting through a few of those mental blocks was really big for me. And so once I kind of regained my faculties, one of the things I did was, because I needed some time to kind of rebuild my body. I actually re-enrolled in the local junior college and started taking a bunch of business classes and entrepreneur classes just to kind of lock down some basic concepts around it, because I'd never started a business before. I had, I was familiar. I'd become pretty familiar with some of the basics, but I hadn't done it. So I got involved. I started taking classes at the local college. I ended up getting an associate's in business, just to supplement my bachelor's. And I also took a local subsidized program that was for entrepreneurs, that basically taught us like all the ins and outs of everything you have to do to start a business, including like filing your fictitious business statement, creating like either starting a sole proprietorship or LLC, and like all the real fundamentals and basics. And I used that, and I also was able to use that as a networking source. And so from that, I ended up using that to launch my business and also get my first client, which was really cool. So
Nice.
so I used that, got my first client, which was actually like a website build. And it was super. I charged like nothing at the time because I needed to kind of build up a experience, and or at least in my mind, I needed to do a few things to kind of get my confidence up. But yeah, after kind of tackling that first client, then I started embracing, okay, like how am I going to do this business? And what I decided was that I wanted to take the concepts that I had learned from the seminar industry, digital marketing, and kind of adapt that to small business owners, especially local and like in my local area, like through the chamber, through like all these different types of businesses. And so that's how I initially started the business. And it quickly, I think we're going to talk a little bit about some digital marketing things, but I learned a lot about the small business side of things, because I had been working on the back end of a 7-figure seminar business, and we had gone through a lot of the belief systems around money, around like these high level concepts, and he charged $100,000 for his high level program. So I had,
Wow.
yes. So I had, what was good was that I had somewhat been exposed to this, almost like the Steve Jobs type reality distortion field, if you've ever read his book,
No.
which is where he was, he would be able to basically convince anyone of his worldview and like distort reality. And I'd say the person I work for had the same gift. And so, I mean, I learned that, like, because you tell somebody outside of the seminar industry that there's $100,000 coaching packages that exist, and people that are not, enterprise level business owners are buying them. And it's like, what? Like, nobody understands it. But when you're in the rooms and you watch it happen, it's real. And there's a psychology to it, and there's a process to it, and there's a value to it.
Of course.
And there, and so
it's all relative too.
It is all relative. And so I had been exposed to a lot of that, and like these things, while being exposed to it, the confidence doesn't necessarily automatically rub off, but the concepts and the ideas and again, the psychology behind it do. I do understand it. And I came to understand it pretty deeply. And so a lot of that is kind of what I started to implement in my business. And it's been, so that was the start of things. And now I'm in, so this accident actually happened in 2014. It wasn't that long ago. So we're not going way back. We're not going way back here. So this is year 4 of my business that I've really been, and we're about completing it. So about year 4 of that. And then and then I had the time working on the back end. So like I consider that like in the same industry, marketing, copywriting. So I've really been doing this field for 5 to 6 years ish. But like the level of growth from running my own business has been like exponential. Like every year I've learned so much, and I feel like I'm like a totally different person each and every year I do this. And basically every year I've been able to double my revenue since I started. And it's been quite a journey, and I've met amazing people along the way. And so it's exciting stuff, but I'd love to talk digital marketing or let me answer your questions. What do you got?
Well, in particular, because I love the fact that and again, maybe it was you have a second chance at life where you're like, you know what, I want to do something that I really, because the insurance thing wasn't happening. Working on, in production and on films, obviously because that's a soul crushing arena.
I only worked on one movie too.
Yeah, but I know, trust me, I know what it's about. But it's what I like is that you found something that is that you're good at, yes, and you can make a really good living at, but you're also helping other people fulfill their dreams. And this is what I've seen, is that there's a renaissance or a boom right now of people who are like, I'm tired of the insurance job. I'm tired of doing the 9 to 5. I'm not happy. I'm living for the weekend only. And so many people, and in particular, there's a lot of women, especially too, that are like, they're reinventing themselves, and at a later, like not in their 20s, but in their 40s and even 50s. And I have clients that are in their 60s, and they're taking on, these new careers, these new businesses. And the thing is that it's exciting, and they've got all this great passion and energy. But one of the hardest things for them is marketing, is getting the word out. And I think just even the importance of our story, the importance of why we are here, and where, that's what grabs me as a podcast host and as a radio host. It's always about the story and the journey, the hero's journey, so to speak, of why someone is in business, why they came up with a product or a service. That's more interesting to me than just saying, hey, I've got this, this shiny new cool thing. You need it. Because that kind of marketing, I think, is either dying or on its way out, right? Yeah.
You're basically describing, so there's like concept of inbound versus outbound marketing. Like outbound marketing is like your old school cold calling, your old school infomercial style, like in your face, used car salesman, all the, that's what I would call outbound marketing in a lot of senses. But inbound marketing is where you're actually producing content, telling your story, doing things that attract people to come to you. And that's the bigger philosophy that's been kind of taking hold in the recent era here. And so I mentioned that I majored in biopsychology and like how that had kind of come back around. So what's interesting is I've really gone in and studied things like, the influence psychology, presentation psychology, persuasion psychology. And what I found is really that, one, no matter what business you're in, I think there's one core fundamental skill that is more important than anything else in all of business, and that's public speaking. And
True that. Yeah.
And so I didn't even mention this, but one of the things I also did after my accident was I finished that NLP training that I had talked about in the beginning. And one of the courses was on NLP for public speaking. And that course made a big difference on my confidence and my ability to consider myself a public speaker. It helped to reframe the way I saw myself in that light. And it helped me to kind of tell my story and do more in this realm. But the reason I say public speaking is so important is because I do believe exactly what you said, that marketing in the modern era is about storytelling, and it's about being able to communicate your message to the most number of people. And so public speaking has multiple purposes. One, it's going to get your message out to a wide variety of people, but two, it also helps to build your authority, even if it's like what you would call perceived authority. When you're on stage, you're instantly perceived as having an expertise because you've been put on a stage. It doesn't matter if
Correct.
it's at a local networking group and you're the speaker. It doesn't matter where you are. You're just instantly viewed as in a higher light. And a lot of that is hardwired into our brains through like evolutionary psychology. So there are certain things that you could do to help build your authority and be viewed as a more credible source. And most of them are going to have some level of public speaking involved. So the ones that I like to highlight the most are, again, just become a public speaker, go speak at your local chamber group, go speak at a local networking group, find gigs like that, and take on free stuff. Like, you don't need to be paid for your speaking efforts, especially if you're just getting started.
Right.
So it's like the more you get yourself out there, the better. And so I do think that's also a challenge. There's a mindset challenge with some people transitioning from employee to entrepreneur where they're very interested in the hourly. Entrepreneurs don't get paid hourly. I can tell you,
No,
like, that's not the right mindset to be in if you're going from employee to entrepreneur.
Don't think it's going to be like, oh, I'm going to work less hours. No, yeah, no.
Yeah.
Sometimes you work a lot.
Especially in the beginning. You might get to a place later on where you can do that, but in the beginning, you're going to work more hours likely.
Yeah.
But like the ways that you could kind of build perceived authority. So like there's writing a book. And so you could write a book, and like with Amazon Create Space, it's easier than ever for anybody to kind of create a book or create an ebook on Amazon, get it out there, get an ISBN behind it. And it's really not that hard. You can go to YouTube and figure it out really if you want to, but
so
there's lots of coaches and people that help you do that. And it's, and there's a lot more to it than just that. So I would recommend working with somebody, but I'm just saying, like, anybody can do it. So that's an opportunity that didn't used to exist.
To write a book before, you had to have an agent, you had to be with a big publishing house. Now it's super, super easy to do. You just got to do it. You got to know how to do it.
Yeah, you got to know how to do it. You got to know the structure, all that.
So writing a book and public speaking, and I know there's a lot of opportunity. Are you familiar with Toastmasters? Because I know about this. Mm-hmm. Have you ever done it?
Yeah, I did Toastmasters. Funny, actually, I did Toastmasters way back when I was like still doing insurance. I first stumbled into it. So that was my first experience, I guess, with the public speaking realm. And it was a time when I've always been kind of a seeker in a lot of senses. And it's funny, I describe Toastmasters as like a support group for public speakers because I don't know how else to describe it. It's you're basically in there. It's very structured. 3 people get a chance to speak. Then you have people that are offering their feedback on how to do it better next time. You have an and an ah counter. Is there really an and an ah counter? Oh, in Toastmasters, yes. There's an and an ah counter, and somebody is counting the ums, counting the ahs, and that's debatable in some public speaking fields how important that is. I think ums and ahs are okay in moderation, but if there's too many of them, it can be very distracting. It can be, and also like the word. There's a lot. I mean, they'll is another one that people go to. So there's a number of ticks or whatever you want to call them that people have, and there's an right there. And it's a placeholder. It's a placeholder. It's while you're kind of gathering your thoughts. Because your mind is going and it's a little placeholder. So I love the idea of Toastmasters. I think it's and it's been around quite a long time as well. Yeah, I think I found more growth from the NLP speaker training than I did from Toastmasters, but I think Toastmasters is a great first step to get exposed to it and get practice. Beginning. And ultimately, ultimately any action that you take towards your goal is going to, like you're opening up parts of your brain just by taking that action, and you're giving yourself the best opportunity to succeed. So I think just the very act that you're doing something is going to give you a better chance at finding what you're looking for.
Exactly.
So beyond so we have the book, and I also argue that writing a book is a vehicle to get more public speaking gigs, because if you're doing it right, you're leveraging that to go get yourself booked on stages, go get yourself booked on television, things like that. So that's also
Podcast
an aspect
shows,
of the book.
Radio, yeah.
Yep, everything. So yeah, this day and age, podcasting is another means of building authority and fast prestige. And when we're talking about business owners that don't have a big budget, I think podcasting is one of the best things they can do right now to get fast credibility and prestige in their business and get their message out there, even if they have a small audience. It doesn't matter if you have a small audience, because this is so good on so many different levels. Number one, you're practicing your public speaking skills by speaking into a mic and doing this. Number two, you're gaining authority by the fact that you're leading a show and you are the host of a show. Number three, you have a vehicle for connecting with other entrepreneurs in your industry or other potential clients in your industry and interviewing them. And that's your vehicle for connection. So it's a massive networking tool that people don't always think about with podcasting, but podcasting opens up doors that were not there before. So I have a show called Marketing Geeks. And with that show, we've been doing it for a year and a half. We've been able to connect with some pretty high level industry leaders in the marketing world. So like people like Pat Flynn, who runs Smart Passive Income, who's well known in the podcast community. He's been on our show. We've had Ryan Levesque, the founder of the Ask Method, who's written 2 best-selling books. We've had Oren Klaff, who wrote Pitch Anything, and John Lee Dumas, who's pretty well known as well in the podcast community. So we've had some like big names, and these are people that I would never be able to connect with without having the show as my vehicle, or it'd be a very different conversation. Put it that way. Maybe I could connect with them, but I might have to pay them, things like that. And if I wanted to spend a day with these people, a lot of them I'd have to spend like $10,000 for a VIP day. I mean, that's how it is to spend a full day with these people. And I get to do it. I get to have an hour of their time for free and ask them anything I want, which is pretty incredible.
And you get to use their name and their fame to promote the podcast show, so more people are going to know who you are. Right.
Yeah. So from an authority building standpoint, every time I have a big name on my show, I borrow some of that prestige, some of that credibility. You could call this like the Oprah Winfrey model is a good example, where you have other people's content. So we don't have to do our own content. We have other people's prestige, and we're putting them on our platform. And every time we do it, we're borrowing, their audience is likely going to listen, and a certain percentage of them will stick around and stay and become a part of our tribe.
Exactly.
So it's a powerful tool, and it's something that anybody can do, and it's affordable if you know what you're doing. So I think podcasting is so amazing. Now, it also lends itself to like what your strengths are, though, because some of us might be better on video. And if you're better on video, what's nice is, number one, you could do a video like you were doing right now and make it into a podcast and use it multi-purpose it. But number two, it's also okay if you just have some kind of a regular show that's like a Facebook Live show. It doesn't have to necessarily even be on the podcast medium.
Correct.
But by having some kind of a show where you're producing content, you're able to bring people on and interview them, and just having this regular distribution form, it's going to do wonders for your business. And I think in the same vein, if you're more kinesthetic, you could look at writing a blog. And I think a blog is also, that's like kind of the old school method, but it's also still very valuable because, again, when it's like being an author, when you write articles, you're perceived in a higher light. It also gives you other opportunities to get your name out there. And all of these things, the more content you put out there, the better your SEO is. Like search engine optimization, which is how Google sees your website and how they rank your website, is becoming less about the tricks that used to be, like they call black hat, which is like the shady stuff. It's less about that this day and age and more about relevant content. It's more about content than it ever has been. And it's going to continue that path. So the more content you have out there, whether that's podcasts, whether that's blogs, whether that's or videos, however you're providing value to your audience, the more relevant Google sees your website as solving a problem that somebody's searching for, the more likely they're going to put you higher in the rankings. And so things like podcasts are actually not only amazing for building your authority, but they're also amazing for SEO. And just like with guest blogging, which was a big thing back in the late 2000s, 2008, 2009, 2010, being a guest on podcasts like I'm doing and like you've done, Christine, is also very big for SEO, because every time that you are a guest on somebody's show and they put a link back to your website, that's considered a backlink, and those are helping to build your SEO profile as well to your website or your offer. So all of this stuff are things that people kind of neglect a lot, and they're inexpensive ways of building authority, prestige, and attracting people to your business. And so I think that if you're getting started in a business, these are the things you have to consider. Don't get too caught up. Like, I know like so many business owners, like they're like, oh, I have to create a Facebook account. Oh, I have to create a Pinterest account. I have to create an Instagram account. I have to create a Snapchat account, like TikTok now. Don't get too caught up in all that. Just remember, like, the fundamentals are always going to apply. It's like you said, story is the fundamental, and there has to be a way of distributing it. But I think like focusing your efforts in a single area are going to be so much more effective than if you try to just like do everything at once.
If you try and do everything at once, and this is what creates burnout. This is what creates overwhelm. There's so many. It's like having, I don't know how old you were. You're young, but when I was a kid, the Ed Sullivan Show or whatever would have the plate spinners. There was like a pole, and somebody would put a plate on it, and they would spin it, and then they would put another pole in, and they would spin another plate, and after a while, there was 12 different plates spinning, and he'd have to go back and make sure there'd be music playing, like circus music, whatever. But when there's too much, a plate can fall down. One thing that you said, and I also highly recommend folks either get on podcast shows to talk about what they do, their specialty, because it's a free infomercial, really.
Yeah.
I mean, somebody is saying, we want to talk to you about, and promote you.
And we want to hear your story.
We want to hear your story. We think, and again, it establishes you as an expert in many ways, but you can also use that on your own website and on your own like Facebook page. You can use that and say, hey, look, this is like a media coverage. Look, somebody interviewed me, but you have you have that beautiful thing of being on someone else's podcast. But when you create your own podcast show as an expert, it doesn't matter, you could be a mom who's able to feed a family for $25 a day or whatever.
Yeah.
Right?
I mean, I'm working right now with a widower that's, spreading her message to other widows. And so, anything. It can be a podcast. And it's an important message. Yeah, important message.
It's in a wonderful arena. So I encourage also entrepreneurs, people who are starting up their business to create their own podcast shows. And that's who a lot of my clients are, right? They're transitioning to this world of podcasting. But not only do you have the audio and the podcast show, establishing yourself as an expert. And if you do the video, that's great because you're also being exposed. People are seeing you on YouTube. You get a whole different audience that you could never have gotten if on your social media, on your Facebook page with your family or friends.
Mm-hmm.
But then you can take the audio from your podcast show. If it's yours, you can take that audio and turn it into an ebook, turn it into a chapter in a book. If you have a series of interviews with people and you're dealing with crisis or you're dealing with stories of widows and you just make sure that it's okay that you can use that.
Yeah.
But then you have an additional product or you have an additional way of generating revenue because you have then the audio that you can turn into copy, that you can turn into text. And that's the way that you can also extend the life of the work that you do.
And you could go and transcribe your podcast episodes. And so there's different ways of doing it, but most sites they'll do like a really good transcription for about $1 a minute, or they'll do an automated one for about 10 cents a minute, which is more affordable, but you're going to have to go in and clean it up a bit. But
you got it. Yeah. Don't ever. I have used a couple I've used a couple transcription services thing, and you do always have to read over it because you're like, oh, good Lord, I did not say that, and that should not go out to the public.
But you're right in that you can repurpose podcasts in so many different ways. You could create months of social media content from your podcast episodes. Just like if you had like some kind of a transcription, if you have an accurate one, or you're manually just grabbing quotes and typing them out. There's so much that can be done to make this into like a ton of content. And if you're using some kind of a tool that helps to automate your social media, you could get like a month worth of content planned out and scheduled out, and it can be done. And that's a very important point that you made.
Yeah. So well, let's see, how are we doing on time? Oh, wow. Okay, so we don't have a whole lot of time left. What about what would you say? So we got folks writing a book, public speaking, podcasting. What else would you say are some really quick little tips, things that people can do that are easy and maybe they're not aware of, but that they can do like right away that could help as they're beginning their transition here into entrepreneurship?
Well, I think, I mean, a lot of business, even to this day, is about relationships. So you should be thinking, like doing some brainstorming activity around like potential power partners, referral partners. So there's I've worked with a number of different industries that like thinking outside the box sometimes to find people. Like I was working with a chiropractor, and we came up with like the concept that I know that there are facilities that are for like even like drug and alcohol rehabs that will hire chiropractors, bring them in, and they get to work with like tons of clients all at once, and like these kind of like way outside the box ideas. And so it's like cold calling some of these bigger these types of businesses and like looking for opportunities that can sometimes lead to massive results. So I like to start there with like the idea of thinking about potential power partners and going after them. And also, one of the things you could do is take care of your existing clients. I think a lot of people don't do that. In marketing, I would say this is kind of a universal tenet that the easiest people to sell to are the people that have already bought from you.
Yes.
So, like if you're not nurturing your relationship with them, then you're putting yourself at a big disadvantage. So, like the way that this has been described is like there's 3 buckets of potential customers. There's like your existing clients. There are people that used to work with you but that are no longer working with you, and then there's people that are not working with you and have never heard of you. And the level of ease in terms of being able to sell to them would go in that order, as in like if you've worked with them before, they're going to be more likely to work with you. If you're still active, they're the hottest market. If they were prior clients, they're the next hottest. And if they've never heard of you, they're cold. And there's a lot of challenges to attract cold traffic, cold people, because you have to educate them. And you have to kind of indoctrinate them to your brand. And in business today, most people don't engage with a brand until they've had a lot of different touch points. Like we're talking like, I've heard anywhere from like 20 to 100 different touch points. So patience is another big thing. It's, a lot of this, it's possible to happen overnight. It's unlikely to happen overnight. And you're going to hit roadblocks. You're going to hit times when you want to give up. But when you can persist through that, like you come out the other end stronger, and often won't have those kind of mistakes arise in your business. But I think that the main thing is I would spend 2 things there. One, start thinking about like who could be a potential referral source, and like think outside the box even about like corporate about commercial businesses that might refer you clients as well.
Right.
And then spend time. Send your thank you cards to your clients. Send a gift. Or if somebody sends you business, like and refers you something, take care of them. So if somebody's referring you business, take care of your referral partners. I had a conversation with somebody recently that said that he had been sending this real estate agent, I don't know, millions of dollars of business, and he was making probably 50 grand a year off of him on referrals. And at one point, he had become the guy that gave him the referrals had joined some program and asked if this guy would sign up under him for like $50. And the guy's like, oh, I'm not really interested in that. And he passed. And so the guy giving the referrals said, okay, you're not interested. Then he walked away and he stopped giving him referrals because it's like if somebody is giving you that much business, like they could sell you anything and you need to say yes. Like it doesn't matter if it's like you have zero interest in it. You're not buying what they're selling. You're paying to nurture that relationship.
Well, and I think so much with entrepreneurs too, that they're on to the next sale, they're on to the next thing, they're on to the next thing. And it's like, well, I've got this client and I'm done and I'm just on to the next thing. One thing that I love to do is to do a client spotlight. Where
that's great.
Because I'm excited about what they're learning. Here's the thing. If you're a really good teacher, coach, consultant, you're going to want to like showcase your, your students, the people that you work with, your clients, because they're doing really well, and it makes them feel awesome.
It does. And
They're
and that
like,
same,
they feel like a special student that got an A, or got a gold star. I
and that
don't know why I
same,
put it on my head, but
yeah, right there, gold star right in the forehead.
yeah.
But in that same regard, yeah, that's something I hadn't even brought up, but yeah, the concept of social proof also is very big. So yeah, if you're able to get testimonial stories from your clients, and especially if you're in the coaching industry or you're in the seminar industry, like one of the biggest factors in presentation psychology is sharing testimonial stories of people that they were like other members of the audience. They overcame problems that the other members of the audience may have currently, and they came out the other side with huge benefits. And so when you share stories like that, it's like a way of bypassing the critical faculty of the mind, and it also disarms objections,
Yeah.
kind of without even thinking about it.
And
So
do it, and also don't just do written testimonials, because the critic or the pessimist in most of us will go, that's a fake made up one.
yeah, that's true too.
Video is so important when there's a testimonial, because it's an actual human being. And unless you have a lot of money to pay an actor, if you're able to have somebody, plus you see the passion in their eyes, you can say, God, working with Justin was the most amazing thing for my business. I have now 6-figure business, all blah, 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 blah.
Yeah, exactly.
We're like racing out of time. I want to let people know, though, how to get in touch with you, and if there's anything that you want to just say in closing. But the website that they can learn more about you is jmackmedia.com. Again, it's going to be a link associated with this interview. But did you want to also let people know, is there an offer that you wanted to do?
Well, yeah, so the website, jmackmedia.com, JMACK, so MACK, media.com. Yeah, if you go to my website and you go there, you'll find that I have an offer right now for a free 15-minute authority building strategy call. So it's kind of like going through the ideas that we talked about here on like what are creative outlets that we could utilize to build quick authority and credibility in your business so that you can leverage that to grow your revenue.
Beautiful. So, and it's jmackmedia.com, JMACK, like the Daddy Mac.
That's right.
Media.com. Please do check him out and take advantage of, he's going to basically, you're going to have his ear, and he's going to know right away some brilliant ideas. This is a very talented young man, and I'm so excited to know you, and you live in the same kind of area code.
That's right. Yeah. Same area, same county.
Yeah, same county, Kentucky. Thank you, everyone. And if you wanted to find out more obviously about the work that I do, you can go to ChristineBlasdale.com, or you can go to outoftheboxwithchristine.com, and all the links are there. But I want to thank you so much, wonderful listeners and viewers of this podcast. And as always, I want to remind you to think outside that damn box, just like Justin. And I will see you and hear from you next time. Bye for now.